Naledi was 38. A quiet woman from Kampala, who had learned to carry her dignity even when life kept trying to strip it away. That Christmas evening, she walked up the familiar pathway to her parents' house with a small wrapped gift tucked under her arm. It wasn't fancy, just a scarf she had saved to buy, but she carried it with a smile, hoping maybe this year would feel different. The house glowed with lights, laughter spilled through the windows, and the smell of roasted meat filled the air. When she stepped inside, her smile widened. She whispered greetings, her voice warm but trembling with hope. She walked toward the dining room, where the table was dressed in red and gold, plates stacked high, glasses shining. But just as she reached the doorway, her brother Cato's wife blocked her path with a cold stare. Her father didn't even look up. Her mother sighed. Then the words came like stones thrown at her heart. "There's no seat for you tonight." For a moment, Naledi froze, clutching her gift tighter as if it could shield her. She looked around at the people who were supposed to be her family. Their eyes told her she didn't belong, not even at their table on Christmas night. Her chest burned, but she forced a small nod, stepping back quietly so they wouldn't see her pain. Inside her, though, something powerful stirred. "They denied me dinner at Christmas," she thought, her lips barely moving. "But I had something bigger waiting." From the time Naledi could remember, everything in her family's world seemed to revolve around her younger brother, Cato. When he was born, her parents treated him like a golden child, the one who would carry the family name with pride. He was given the best of everything, better clothes, better food, and later the best schools. While Naledi studied under the dim light of a kerosene lamp, Cato was driven to private academies in shiny cars. Their parents never hid their favoritism. They spoke of Cato's bright future at every family gathering, while Naledi's efforts were brushed aside like dust. When Cato turned 18, her father bought him his first car. Naledi, at the same age, was told to find a job and contribute to the household. And she did. She worked long hours, sometimes juggling 2 or 3 small jobs in Kampala. She taught in schools, helped in shops, and even cleaned offices late at night. Every month she sent money back home, believing she was doing her duty as a daughter. But each time, the money was treated as expected, never acknowledged, never appreciated. Meanwhile, her parents praised Cato for every little thing he did. If he brought home a single bag of groceries, they celebrated him like a hero. Naledi's sacrifices, on the other hand, went unnoticed. She bought books for her younger cousins, helped with school fees, and even cleared hospital bills when her mother was sick. Yet, when the family gathered, they spoke only of Cato's success, his charm, his importance. Year after year, Naledi buried her pain and smiled through it, convincing herself that one day they would see her worth. But deep down, she knew the truth. In their eyes, she would always be the shadow behind her brother's light. That shadow carried every burden. But nobody cared to notice the strength it took to keep standing. The dining room was glowing with Christmas lights, the table overflowing with food that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Roasted goat, rice piled high, golden chapati, sweet cakes, everything Naledi used to dream of sharing as a family. She stood quietly at the doorway, clutching her small gift, watching everyone laugh as if the world was perfect. When she tried to step closer, her father waved her off with impatience. "You can sit there," he said, pointing not to the long decorated table, but to a small wooden stool shoved near the kitchen door. Naledi's heart sank, but she obeyed. She placed her gift on her lap and lowered herself onto the stool, trying not to let the sting show on her face. From her corner, she could see the others clinking glasses, serving each other with warmth. No one passed her a plate. No one asked if she was hungry. She watched her brother's children laugh with their mouths full, while her own stomach tightened with every smell that floated toward her. Finally, she gathered the courage to lean forward and reach for a piece of chapati at the edge of the table. Before her fingers could touch it, her sister-in-law slapped her hand away with a sharp smack. The sound cut through the laughter. Naledi's cheeks burned with shame. "Don't be greedy," the woman sneered. "Be grateful you're even inside." The room erupted in laughter, cruel and careless. Her mother looked away, her father said nothing, and her brother grinned as if it was all a joke. Naledi's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to remind them of all the years she had stood by them, but her voice refused to rise. Instead, she sat back on the stool, her eyes stinging, her chest heavy. At that moment, she realized the truth. She wasn't family to them. She was just a shadow they allowed to sit in the corner. Naledi sat on that hard little stool, her hands trembling on her lap. Every laugh that echoed around the table felt like a knife cutting deeper into her chest. She tried to swallow the lump in her throat, tried to blink away the tears that were threatening to fall. But when her brother's wife leaned over again and whispered, "Don't act like you belong here," something inside her cracked. She knew she couldn't sit there another minute. Slowly, she rose from the stool. Nobody noticed at first, too busy clinking glasses and cheering Cato's so-called success. She slipped her scarf around her shoulders, picked up her handbag, and turned toward the door. The gift she had brought still sat unopened on her lap, forgotten. No one stopped her. No one asked where she was going. To them, her leaving meant nothing. To her it meant everything. Outside, the Kampala night was cold, the kind of chill that cut through bones. She stepped into the darkness, her shoes crunching softly against the gravel. The Christmas lights from the house glowed behind her, mocking her like cruel reminders of where she didn't belong. She hugged her bag tighter against her chest, as if guarding a secret treasure. Because inside that simple leather handbag was not just her wallet, not just her keys. It carried a folder, thick, heavy, filled with papers that told a story her family had no idea about. They thought she was empty-handed, that she came only with a scarf and a smile. But Naledi walked away knowing the truth. She wasn't empty. She was holding their future in her hands. As the night air stung her cheeks, a quiet strength settled over her heart. "They thought they denied me dinner," she whispered to herself. "But I was carrying something bigger than food." Years before that painful Christmas night, Naledi had already been carrying her family's burdens in silence. Their small family business, once proud and promising, had begun to collapse. Debts piled up like heavy stones, and creditors knocked at the door almost every week. Her father pretended everything was fine. Her mother prayed loudly for miracles, and Cato only complained that he couldn't live the life he deserved. Nobody seemed ready to face the truth. But Naledi saw the numbers. She knew how close they were to losing everything. While her family looked down on her, she quietly worked double shifts, saving every shilling she could. Her coworkers laughed when she refused small luxuries, but Naledi was focused on something bigger. Piece by piece, she gathered enough to clear the worst of the debts. Only she didn't put it in her parents' name. She registered the payments under her own, knowing one day she might need to protect herself. The biggest sacrifice came when the bank threatened to take their home. Foreclosure papers had already been prepared. Her father begged for extensions, her mother wept, and Cato shouted at the bankers as if anger could pay bills. But Naledi didn't waste words. She quietly walked into the bank, signed the papers, and bought the mortgage herself. No one knew. That house, the same one where she was treated like an outsider at Christmas, was standing because of her. She never told them. Instead, she let them believe it was their prayers, or maybe Cato's connections, that saved the day. Naledi carried the truth in silence, hoping one day they would see her worth. But they never did. All they saw was the sister they could push aside. What they didn't know was that every meal they ate under that roof, every night they slept peacefully, was because she had already paid the price. Naledi had not walked into that Christmas gathering unprepared. Months earlier, she had already sat across from her lawyer, Mr. Odong, in a quiet office in downtown Kampala. He was a patient man with sharp eyes, the kind who listened carefully before speaking. Naledi had slid a stack of papers across his desk, bank receipts, mortgage documents, proof of ownership. "I don't want revenge," she had told him softly. "I only want what is mine to be respected." Together, they prepared everything with care. Mr. Odong drafted the legal documents that made her the rightful owner of the family home. He filed them with the courts, secured the orders, and placed the final copy in a leather folder that Naledi carried everywhere. To her, it wasn't just paperwork. It was her shield, her truth, her dignity written in ink and sealed by the law. She hoped she would never need to use it in such a brutal way. In her heart, she dreamed that maybe one day her family would apologize, recognize her sacrifices, and give her the respect she had long deserved. But that Christmas night destroyed that hope. Sitting on a stool in the corner, being slapped away from food, mocked and laughed at. It was the final wound on scars that had never healed. They hadn't just denied her a seat at the table, they denied her humanity. As she walked away into the cold night, clutching her handbag with the folder inside, her decision hardened. Respect was no longer something she would wait for. It was something she would demand. If they refused to give her a place at the table, she would take the whole house instead. That folder was not just paper. It was justice. And she was ready to serve it. The next morning, the house was filled with laughter again. Wrapping paper littered the floor as the children tore open shiny boxes, and Cato boasted loudly about how his house was always the heart of Christmas. Nalady's empty chair was not even noticed. To them, she was already forgotten. Then came the knock. A firm, heavy knock that silenced the room. Her father frowned, pushing back his chair, while her mother muttered about unexpected visitors on Christmas morning. When the door swung open, two men stood there, one in a dark suit carrying a folder, the other in uniform. The man in the suit spoke clearly, his voice steady. By order of the High Court of Uganda, this property is now transferred to Ms. Naladine Sabuga. For a moment, the room froze. The words didn't seem real. Cato jumped to his feet, his face twisted with confusion. What nonsense is this? This is my house, he shouted. The bailiff didn't flinch. He handed over the official notice, stamped and sealed, and added, "You have 7 days to vacate." Gasps filled the room. Children clutched their toys, sensing the tension. Nalady's mother's hands trembled as she grabbed the papers, scanning them with wide eyes. The signature, the seal, the dates. Everything was legal, everything was true. The roof above their heads, the walls around them, the table they were sitting at. It all belonged to the very daughter they had mocked the night before. Outside, Nalady stood quietly on the walkway, her scarf wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't crying either. She simply waited, her presence calm but unshakable. They had denied her a place at the table. Now she was serving them something much heavier. The truth, written in law and delivered to their door. Chaos exploded the moment the bailiff's words sank in. Cato stormed across the room, veins bulging in his neck, his voice shaking with rage. "This is impossible. This is my house," he bellowed, grabbing the papers from his mother's trembling hands. He scanned the stamp, the court seal, the signatures, and for the first time in his life, his confidence cracked. The truth was right there in black and white. His wife let out a scream and collapsed onto the couch, her hand pressed to her forehead as though the world had ended. The children started crying, frightened by the shouting. Their mother fell to her knees in front of Nalady as she finally stepped inside. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched Nalady's skirt. "Please, my daughter, don't do this. We are family. You can't turn us out." Her father's face burned red with fury. He pointed a shaking finger at her, spitting out words like poison. "You betray us like this? After everything we gave you? You dare to humiliate us on Christmas." Nalady's eyes didn't waver. She walked to the center of the room, her handbag still on her shoulder, her posture calm and steady while the storm swirled around her. She looked directly at her brother, then at her parents, and spoke with a voice that was low but firm. "It was never yours," she said. "This house would have been gone years ago if I hadn't stepped in. I paid the debts. I saved the roof over your heads. While you mocked me, I carried the weight that kept you standing." Her words cut deeper than any notice could. The room went silent for a moment, the weight of her truth pressing down heavier than the court order itself. For the first time, they saw Nalady not as the shadow in the corner, but as the pillar holding the house they claimed as theirs. The shouting inside the house was so loud that neighbors began to gather outside the gate. Some had heard whispers for years about how badly Nalady's family treated her, but now they were seeing it with their own eyes. A few pulled out their phones, quietly recording as Cato screamed, his wife wailed, and their mother clung to Nalady's legs in tears. From the street, the scene looked like a movie, chaotic, heartbreaking, and strangely powerful. One neighbor uploaded the video to Facebook with a short caption that said it all. "Christmas eviction after family denied her food." Within minutes, comments poured in. Some people didn't believe it at first, but the video spoke for itself. Nalady's calm face against her family's outrage was unforgettable. Others quickly added their own clips from different angles, showing her father shouting, Cato waving the court papers, and Naledi standing steady like she had been waiting for this day all her life. By the end of the afternoon, the video had already crossed thousands of views. By nightfall, it was in the millions. People shared it with captions like, "Never underestimate the quiet one in the family," and "They denied her dinner, she gave them eviction." Strangers from across Uganda, and even other countries began writing in support of Naledi. Some called her brave. Others said her story reminded them of their own silent sacrifices that went unrecognized. Hashtags started trending, hashtag Christmas eviction, hashtag Naledi strong, hashtag respect her. While her family sat stunned inside the house, the whole world outside was cheering for Naledi. The humiliation they had meant to bury her with had instead lifted her voice higher than she ever imagined. In just a few hours, she went from the forgotten daughter in the corner to the woman whose story everyone was talking about. The living room was thick with tension, the eviction notice still lying on the table like a bomb that had gone off. Naledi calmly unzipped her handbag and pulled out the leather folder she had carried for years. Her hands did not shake as she laid the documents out, one by one, for everyone to see. "You think this is betrayal," she said softly. "But the truth is written here." She held up receipts of every debt she had paid, the bank transfers, the cleared bills, the signed contracts. Her father's eyes widened as he recognized his own signature on the original foreclosure notice. "You remember this, don't you?" Naledi asked. "You were about to lose everything. I stepped in." Cato tried to speak, but his voice faltered when she turned another page. Mortgage papers sealed and registered under her name. "You called this house yours," she continued. "But from the moment the bank gave up on you, it was mine. I just never told you, because I thought one day you might respect me without needing proof." Then she reached into the folder again and pulled out something different, letters and text printouts. Cruel words her family had written to her over the years. Notes where her brother ordered her to send money. Messages from her mother reminding her that she was just a helper, not the important one. Even one from her father telling her she should be grateful to eat scraps. One by one, she laid them out beside the receipts, the evidence of both her sacrifice and their cruelty. The room grew silent. The weight of the truth pressed down on them like a storm. For the first time, they saw the pattern clearly. Naledi had been the one carrying them all along. The silent backbone, the reason they still had a roof above their heads. And now, that same backbone was standing tall, demanding the respect they had refused to give. The silence after Naledi's truth felt heavier than any shouting. Her father sat with his head in his hands, her mother's tears soaking the hem of her skirt. Cato paced the floor like a trapped animal, muttering to himself, while his wife sobbed on the couch. The arrogance that once filled the room had vanished, replaced by desperation. One by one, they turned to Naledi, their voices breaking. "Please, my daughter," her mother whispered. "Don't throw us out. This is our home." Cato dropped to his knees, his pride shattered. "Naledi, I was wrong. You can't do this to your own brother. Give us another chance. Let's work something out." Her father, once the loudest voice in the room, now spoke softly. "We made mistakes. But family should forgive. Don't shame us like this." Naledi looked at each of them, her eyes calm, her voice steady. "Do you remember last night?" she asked. "When I stood at the doorway with a gift and a smile. I asked only for a seat, a place at the table. You told me there was no room for me. You laughed while I sat on a stool. You slapped my hand when I reached for food. You denied me dignity in my own house." She let the words settle, then straightened her shoulders. "When I asked for a seat, you denied me. Now I deny you the roof. This house is mine, and you have 7 days to leave." Gasps filled the air. Her mother clung tighter, her father shouted her name, Cato begged. But Naledi didn't waver. For the first time in her life, she was no longer the shadow in the corner. She was the one holding the power, and she was not going to give it back. 7 days later, the house was quiet. The laughter, the boasting, the voices that once filled it were gone. Naledi stood at the doorway, keys in her hand, and for the first time, she felt the walls breathe with her instead of against her. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was her victory, her proof that the woman they called unworthy had been the one holding everything together all along. But Naledi didn't keep it just for herself. With her savings and a little help from well-wishers who had seen her story online, she began to renovate. The dining room that once denied her a seat was rebuilt with a long wooden table, where no woman would ever be told she didn't belong. The spare bedrooms were painted fresh, turned into safe spaces with soft beds for women who had nowhere to go. She named it Nsabuga Women's Center, a home for those abandoned, humiliated, or mistreated by their own families. Soon, women from different parts of Kampala began to arrive. Some were young girls thrown out for being pregnant, others were widows left behind with nothing. Naledi welcomed each one with the dignity she had once been denied, reminding them that their worth was not measured by how their families treated them. Her story continued to spread online, inspiring thousands. And as she stood in front of the house during the opening, surrounded by women smiling with hope, she spoke the words that would echo far beyond Uganda. They denied me dinner at Christmas, but I served them the eviction notice that fed my dignity forever.